I was a devout Jehovah's Witness for 19 years. And today I'm going to do something different. I'm going to share nothing but positive experiences as a Jehovah's Witness. Now, I want to isolate these niceties from this standpoint alone. I'm not highlighting doctrinal things. I'm just highlighting experiences that I would have experienced from an emotional standpoint, a psychological standpoint, a mental standpoint, which is the same thing, and a social standpoint. But also from a physical standpoint involving environment, good stuff. Also, it's healthy to isolate Jehovah's Witnesses from God and isolate Jehovah's Witnesses from the Bible, because the Bible was around before Jehovah's Witnesses, and we know that God has always been around. So, but it's not to take away from where I got my introduction to the Bible. Rather, it was fully correct or not. And a lot of it doctrinally was not correct. So I say that to say this. I grew up in a very bad area. People sold drugs all the time. I would hear gunshots. I would see people one day and the next day they were dead. This is not making this up. So when Jehovah's Witnesses came into my life at the age of it was before 11, because I was born into the religion. My mom just wasn't a witness, but a lot of my other relatives were. So there was a lot of drugs and immorality surrounding me, and I grew up in a very bad area. So even if I had been introduced to a church or any religious institution, it would have played out the same. But I have to be careful not to downplay the fact that my first introduction was through Jehovah's Witnesses. It's like a relationship. There can be billions of good women. And let's say that your first experience with a romantic or significant other is going well, and then it goes south. Let's say the first 3 years, they're really good to you, and then it starts going really bad. You can choose to only highlight all the bad stuff that person did. Yes, it may have led to a breakup, and yes, it would be rightfully so. But to not give them some credit if you know for the first 3 years they did a really good job. And you can attribute it to their own individual character, their upbringing, however you want to look at it. Be fair. It's healthy, it keeps you objective, and it also helps to protect your mind from becoming bitter and negative. Now, that's your personal choice. So it's always good to see, well, what good things did I learn? Now, likewise with that woman or that man that you could be in a relationship with, you should not take that to represent all relationships, even relationships that aren't romantic. Some people do that. They can't separate a romantic relationship from a regular friendship or a friendship with just your homeboy or homegirl, with your brother, your sister, your cousin, or your parents. Each situation is different, or your associates or your co-workers, whatever you want to say. We have to isolate each individual one, because if not, we can internalize bad experiences and make it all whole. So with that being said, I don't think Jehovah's Witnesses are responsible for my morality that I have developed. And however, that was my introduction to it. That's how powerful God's word is. So if I was being taught about God, why would I give Jehovah's Witnesses the credit? I should give it all to God. However, I was taught about the Bible through Jehovah's Witnesses, so I have to give them credit for that. Now, all the stuff wasn't good, but I did appreciate this about my Bible study conductors. What they did, they taught me to focus on being a good student, like really knowing the scriptures, memorizing scriptures. And although I have a really good memory, I can't say definitively whether or not I would have committed so many scriptures to memory as a young man. I did that. I studied the Bible, and when I was 11 years old, that's what they told me to do. Also, Brother Connor set a good example in praying. That was my first time ever seeing somebody pray. He prayed before and after the Bible study that we would have, and he checked in on me, and his wife did a lot of good things. Now, of course, their interest in me was to get me to become a Jehovah's Witness, but I know it was genuine. There's a lot of things that I see now that would not be all the way genuine because there was a motive behind it, but you have to let people be people. And during that time frame, young men, because I didn't have a father in my life either. Now I had my stepdad, but he was a good stepdad regarding paying bills and stuff before spending time and being present and teaching you life lessons. Not bashing, just being fair. That never happened. So young men, and I'm not one to play the race card whatsoever, but young black men, depending on what area you grew up in and what your surroundings are, you can go either one way. Either you can turn to gangs and drugs, or you turn to God. I turned to God. I just happened to get it from what most would consider a destructive group. And I do think there's a lot of aspects about it that is destructive and is not of God, a lot of it. However, that's not the people's fault, the regular witnesses. That's coming from the governing body. So you have to separate that as well. But Brother Connors did teach me how to study the Bible. Before, I had never read a Bible before. That was my first introduction, was a New World Translation, the Black Bible. They taught me how to locate the scriptures. I remember him saying, hey, just, he used to call me pup. He used to pat me on my face and call me pup. Just turn to the front and look at the table of contents and find the page number, and then you can locate the Bible books. And naturally, when I had a good memory, after doing it just a couple of times, I would automatically know where the Bible books were. And he said also develop a daily habit of reading the Bible. If that was my first introduction, I'm not saying I couldn't have gotten it from another church that would have told me that. I'm just giving them credit. That was the introduction that benefited me. So as I'm reading it, I started applying what I was learning, because I used to sag my pants. You may find it hard to believe, but I used to wear nothing but baggy clothes. And I started changing my language. I started watching my association, because all the kids that I would hang around, they did sell drugs. Now, I never sold it myself. I always had this natural inclination toward God, and I wanted to do the right thing. So that's why I was so accepting of a Bible study. So I remember I was the first teenager in my family that whose parents were not in the organization, that I made a dedication. And I was coming to meetings by myself. They picked me up. I had no parent, nobody making me go. I did it all on my own. And I would get to the Kingdom Hall. People were impressed with that, because they were saying, we don't see too many young men come to the Kingdom Hall by himself. And that gave me a good structure regarding spirituality. Now, it wasn't exactly right looking back on it. And it's not right in many ways, because there's actually better religions than Jehovah's Witnesses. Far better. But I appreciate the sincerity, because I know genuineness when I see it. So that was my first introduction to morality. I appreciate that. And how they do their Bible studies programs, although it is an indoctrination program, it still made me have discipline with that. And the only thing I would change in that process is being upfront and transparent with people, and making them have freedom where you actually study the Bible, not just publications, Bible study, because you're studying more of that than the actual Bible. Another thing that I was able to observe as a Jehovah's Witness as a young man was seeing a good example, even if it was put on a front, because I only saw you can only see what people would do at the Kingdom Hall. I didn't know what was going on in people's private lives. I still was able to see a positive example, even if it was a perfunctory, of a husband and a wife together, because I didn't see that in my home. So I was able to have many father figures that took an interest in me spiritually. Although, again, they're misguided, but you have to give them credit for their genuineness. Also, having routines such as cutting the grass, you can't definitively disprove that they didn't shape you as an individual. So, again, this has nothing to do with doctrines, but I'm just highlighting some good things. Structure is always good. Now, you don't want to have it destructive, but that was my introduction. Another thing, it takes a lot of tenacity. Now, although other people preach all over the world, and they preach in many ways that's more effective than Jehovah's Witnesses, but give them credit for going out during winter times, rain, keeping track of trying to at least preach to people. Now, what they're preaching is not correct, but the correctness and the sincerity of the heart is. And I know that God still appreciates that, as Hebrews 6:10 brings out, God is not unrighteous to forget your works. Now, I can be sincere and go to the gym and do the wrong exercise all day if I'm trying to work my legs, but I keep doing upper body exercises. I am sincere, but I'm not going to get any results. So you still have to have accuracy and succinct accuracy. So there would be what's needed. Now, another thing that I appreciate is teaching me to always stand up for what's true, which is why I left the religion. That you have to be willing to take a stand for what's right, because your relationship is with Jehovah in Christ Jesus and no one else. And I always think about Aaron and Moses and Joshua and all those. See, God would have held them accountable, although Moses was the leader. He would have held them accountable if they listened and followed things that Moses was saying that wasn't right, which is why Moses didn't enter the promised land. So we all have that individual accounting. Now, another thing I feel was good, but it also was bad too. It gave me a healthy view of how to have a healthy distance from the opposite sex. Now, it also is damaging because it can make you awkward with females. But for me, it trained me to look at them as queens. Now, I'm not saying I need the Jehovah's Witnesses to look at women as queens. That was just nobody else was teaching me. So it taught you to have respect. Now, most people disagree with chaperones and all that kind of, none of that is in the Bible. It doesn't say any of that, but I appreciated the sincerity of just trying to really help people not fall into sin. Now there's negative consequences of not really getting to know someone on a personal level, because you don't really know what you're getting into. But I think there's some wisdom to that. I'm not saying that you should never spend a long time in like one-to-one time, but also I think it is a form of protection in a lot of different ways if you are living by Bible-based standards. Now, I also think it's bad, because if the only reason you're not falling into sexual immorality is because you have somebody monitoring you, then you never developed it on the inside, and you're probably going to fall prey to it in the future. Because this is where, like Jesus said, what's in your heart eventually comes out. Doesn't make you a bad or good person, just means that you need to develop those characteristics on the inside. So it is actually better how other groups do it, where there are way more other Christians than Jehovah's Witnesses. And a lot of these people save themselves for marriage as well. And they maintain their chastity without chaperones, because they never trained themselves to say, I'm only doing what's good because I need somebody to monitor me. So we have the evidence and the proof that their way is better. However, even with that, it kind of does serve as a protection for somebody that's very, very weak in that area. Maybe they don't have any self-control. So perhaps that person should acknowledge, I have no self-control. It'll be better for me to have somebody. But even then, that's not stopping anything, because they can do whatever they want. So what I'm saying is, I think it's best to do the one-to-one, and the people because you're going to do what you want to do anyway. I'm just simply highlighting that I think that there's some good that comes from that. I'm not saying that it's all good. So I just appreciated that. Another thing was community. Now, there is actually a better community at the congregation I'm attending, or the church that I'm attending, because it's more genuine and it's not forced. So although I think that there's more religions that are better than Jehovah's Witnesses, I still like to highlight what's unique about them. And I think that the sincerity of trying to have a close-knit community and really trying to look after one another is good. And I think subconsciously that trained me to do that with everybody else. Now, of course, I could have learned it anywhere, but that was my introduction. It's like having a father, and let's say that you realize that other fathers are way better than yours. Does that mean that you should now just discount everything your father did and just say, oh, he's just an old bad man? Yes, clearly these were a better example of fathers, just like religion. Jehovah's Witness would be that father, and there's better religions. But that was my first introduction. That was my experience. And also, I think the religion is good for mental illness, but also it's horrible for mental illness because a lot of people don't have the intellect to think outside the box sometimes, and they wouldn't have a purpose. Now, a fake purpose is still not a purpose because it's not real, but if that's all that person is capable of doing, let's say they have a mental illness or an intellectual disability, and it gives them a structure, they wouldn't be able to figure out anything else on their own. So, but also it could impact their mental illness in a negative way too. So that's why I would say you don't need a high control environment to have a fake purpose. You can find that at a healthier group where it's not trying to control you at a church or anywhere. So it's not necessary, but it still can serve its purpose if it gives somebody else a hope, even if it's not real, but maybe it just fits their personality more. So what I began to realize is a lot of people don't do everything always based on facts. They do it based on emotional things and feelings, which you have to throw that out when it comes down to searching for objective truth, because you have to remember this. You don't have to protect truth from lies, but you do have to protect the lies from the truth. And how the organization does a lot of things, like with that video, the convention video that they have for 2025, where the guy is saying, how can you know what I'm saying if you won't even look at it? And he said there's only one truth, but nothing is ever addressed in comparing Jesus, when Satan tempted Jesus, with the person that's simply asking questions, which is so manipulative and evil. And that is the kind of stuff that really upsets me with the organization, because that's manipulation. And although I'm giving them credit for certain things, I don't give them much credit for doctrinal things, because when I took time to really think about it, there's not one thing that Jehovah's Witnesses taught me that I couldn't have learned anywhere else that was correct teachings. Because we had all these other religions around before Jehovah's Witnesses, Christian religions. The same things that Jehovah's Witnesses teach that I agree with was already being taught by other religions. But all of their unique stuff is wrong. So that's why, not bashing, but to be fair and accurate, the doctrinal part was a waste of my time. They taught me nothing but garbage in that way. So whether it was sincere or not, the doctrines are wrong. Now, the ones that they have correct are not unique to Jehovah's Witnesses, already being taught. So I wish I could give them credit. I can't think of one unique thing that Jehovah's Witnesses taught me that I can't prove that was already being taught by another religion that's actually objectively true with the hermeneutics and the exegesis of scriptures. So, for example, if people believe in just not having a Unitarian, like not having a Trinitarian aspect, but a Unitarian aspect, there's other religions that were teaching that before Jehovah's Witnesses. If you're against hellfire, there's plenty of people that were already teaching that. And I can go down the list on and on. All religions teach morality and happy family happiness, and they have church discipline. I'm not making this up. I've seen it. Now, I would have never known this if I stayed a Jehovah's Witness. I would have just assumed that nobody else cares about that based on what they are telling you, because you're not supposed to ever get close to people that are not in the religion. and you don't really talk about their religion because you're always trying to talk about yours because you automatically think that they're wrong and you're right. So you have blinders on. And that other person that doesn't know that Jehovah's Witnesses teach that all other religions are false and that only they are right and moral, upstanding citizens, the person would even know to educate you about what they do. Or perhaps you might see some people from a church group that don't represent their church well, just like Jehovah's Witnesses. They have members that wouldn't represent their group well. But the person is never thinking, well, wait a minute, if this church has 5,000 people, two people can't speak for the whole group, but people aren't thinking well. So that is some things that I'm thinking about. Also, I think that the tenacity that you learn as Jehovah's Witnesses now again, before I started giving any public talks, I was already doing demonstrations at school with poetry. I was always speaking up. So for me, when I got on a theocratic ministry school, that was like easy because I was already doing that at my schools. I was doing poetry. I was already presenting and representing my school before I became a Jehovah's Witness. So my public speaking, I can't say that they came from Jehovah's Witnesses. I was already doing it. It's like I was just born to do it. Now, did they help refine public speaking skills? Of course, by forcing you to do it. So that's a good thing. It also helps you to be better, to communicate better with your employees in a lot of different ways. And of course, a lot of people learn this through other ways with their church or they go to school for it. So the Jehovah's Witnesses don't have the monopoly on that. But if that's where you got your skills from, or some of them, then you just give it credit. And that's all I'm saying. Now, for somebody to interpret that as you can only get that through them, that is grossly false. And they're much better setups than that. But let's give that credit. Also, I think the religion helps you to be consciously focused on always having good conduct for the sake of God. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses mess up in this way: good conduct for the sake of God's organization. Not saying that it is God's organization, but that's how they would phrase it. It should be just good conduct for God alone, not a group of people. But once you're able to separate that, when you're just talking to people like atheists and agnostic or other people that don't believe in God or whom may not be of a Christian faith, it just brings honor to God in general when anybody lives according to his standards. Even if you are even if you are in Judaism, Islam, regardless of doctrinal things or trying to say which one is a true religion, what they have in common is God. They may call them different things, in a healthy belief system. That if you look at it closely, that's what everybody has in common. So it still makes people attracted to spirituality to see that there's a moral base somewhere in place. Now, looking at, the conscious awareness that Jehovah's Witnesses do a good job with, of helping you to always be consciously aware of your conduct, your environment, and your spiritual need. Now, it can be unbalanced and unhealthy where it strips away your individuality. And again, this is not with truth. I'm just simply highlighting some good tenets that you can learn from anywhere, but that was my introduction. And I think it creates a structure where you want to check on people. And I've experienced that same setup at the current church that I'm attending. But that is some good things that I appreciate. And also, what a Jehovah's Witness would do, if they think that you're wrong, they're going to try to at least warn you. Some people of other faiths sometimes don't do that. They may not be aware. They may not feel like that's their role. They may just leave that up to the elders or the pastors at the churches. But the actual individual members, even if they don't have a title such as a pioneer, an elder, a ministerial servant, I've noticed that a lot of the individual members make it their aim to look out for your spiritual welfare. Now, other people do that as well. I haven't been to a lot of groups yet, so I'm still experiencing this new setup. But they feel like that's more of the pastor's role, and the pastors do that, and the elders, people that's been assigned, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses. But because the groups are smaller, it makes it easier for some of the members to try to show you that love. Now, most people would be like, it's conditional, because that is true. If you stop attending and stop social, they're going to cut you off. The churches will not do that. Those members are going to stay in contact with you. Their friendship isn't situational. So that is better than Jehovah's Witnesses. However, Jehovah's Witnesses are being sincere when they're checking on you, even if they're sincerely misguided. So that's all I wanted to say regarding that. Note taking. It would be so much better if Jehovah's Witnesses had sound doctrine on a lot of stuff, because they would have so many thoroughly educated people that really know how to defend God's word, not defending it with the eisegesis and the indoctrination thing, like sound like a salesman, because it's really basic stuff that Jehovah's Witnesses teach that everybody learns. It's not real in-depth stuff. I know that may be hard for some Jehovah's Witnesses whom are listening to this to accept, but I guarantee you, if you step back and just read the Bible and study sound doctrine, you're going to see that you didn't know squat about the Bible. You knew some basic stuff. It's like saying that you knew push-ups in a treadmill, in an elliptical train. Now you think you're a fitness expert. And you're going to realize, oh, I didn't know a whole lot. Guaranteed. Now, those are just some things I wanted to say. And I had a good experience with a group of Jehovah's Witnesses a few hours ago. So I attended a graduation, and they know that I speak out on YouTube. They know that I left the religion. They know that I don't have any plans of coming back. I can't come back to something that I know is wrong, that's harming people. Now, even if they made a lot of changes openly, I think the only way that I would even consider that, they will have to get rid of the blood, shunning, admit their real history and apologize for it, and eliminate all the governing body members and start over fresh, and stop making themselves above people, and just be so transparent. And a new group comes in and said that, they were wrong. They were false prophets. They were misleading people. They have ruined a lot of people, but that's why we got rid of all of them. And moving forward, we are not your leaders. We are not even a faith, but that's not even a Bible teaching. We are not people that's over you. And then they begin to run themselves like a real church in a Christian group. At that particular point, they will have to change up their name too, and just condemn Jehovah's Witnesses, that history, and start over fresh. Because again, if the roots are wrong, the whole thing is wrong. But there's a possible way to transform yourself if you just be open about everything and totally separate yourself from that, and never repeat those patterns again, where you run yourself in a way where you can be considered as a cult. Now, many may be surprised that I've actually for the first time said that word, but as I'm talking to you, I was convicted just now to say it. So I was waiting for that confirmation. I just said it. Now, again, I'm not saying that's what they are. Now, if you are wise enough, you can kind of put two together to get my concept on that. But I'm very careful with my language, not based on what's true. I know how people's phobias are. So I'm not going to overuse that word. Now, that would be the only way that I would even consider, not and their doctrine would have to be true. They would have to teach the real truth about certain things. And I would be impressed with that level of humility. I really would. And I would pray to God sincerely about it. I say, okay. And also they have to accept that they're not the truth. No religion is. That's also a false doctrine, to be treated only you. And they'll have to understand that that's not the truth. That's not what's taught in the Bible like that. So I say that to say this. When I went to that gathering earlier, there were 4 Jehovah's Witnesses present, and one of them is a higher ranking one. And They were nice to me, and they know what I do. And I have to give them credit for that. I was not expecting that. I was not expecting the guy that actually speaks out about things that the organization doesn't do right. And I try to be very fair, loving, and positive. And I know they've probably watched some of my videos and know, and they are devout Jehovah's Witnesses. And they were pleasant to me. And I was kind of shocked. I'm not gonna be straight up honest with you. I was shocked. And I wanted that because we don't even have to talk about religion. And I do hope that they wake up to the real truth someday, because I want them to be free and to realize that they're being taken advantage of. They really are. And it really breaks my heart so much, but I have to just come from love. So anyway, please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment on my channel. And let's share nothing but positive experiences as Jehovah's Witness. Share your experiences, and also things that you don't want people to think that you're saying that they are the God's organization. So make sure you separate that. But share your positive experiences. And this is important for all of us so that we don't form our mind to not realize that we're just only focusing on the bad. And this is a part of the healing process, so that you don't see that it was just a waste of time. Like, did I actually take something good away from it? If you can see that now some people have different experiences. When you talk about people that have family members whom have unalived themselves or are victims of CSA, they're not probably going to be able to think like that. And rightfully so, because their experiences were all negative. They're not going to even be able to see or fathom that. And I'm not going to push that on them, because they're victims and I love them. And I wish I could take all that pain away. I really wish I could. So again, like, comment, subscribe to my channel, and share it, and share your thoughts. It's been a pleasure. Have a good weekend and take care. Bye.